before this year, when it came to Pixar sequels, the main general consensus tended to sort them into three main categories: the good, the bad, and the eh. They weren't as good as the originals though, were they? And I say before this year because a problem has arisen in the last few months, being The Incredibles 2. You see, I don't think it undisputably improves upon the original film like the Toy Story films do, and I definitely wouldn't advise against watching it like the one I pretend doesn't exist. Pixar didn't release a film in 2011, what are you talking about? And for that reason, I'm assuming most people put it in this middle category, but I just think it's completely unfair to put it in that category because there's a clear difference between Incredibles 2 and, I don't know, Finding Dory. Which is why, for some reason, I've decided to make an entire video dedicated to why Incredibles 2 is better than Finding Dory and doesn't belong in this imaginary middle category that I've made up in my head. I really need to start saying my video ideas out loud before I start making them. Now, there's a key difference between these sequels right from the off. One was necessary and the other wasn't. What I mean is that Incredibles 2 was teased from the end of the original and has had people demanding a sequel for the last decade. Whereas Finding Nemo ended quite fittingly, and I don't remember anyone ever asking for a sequel. Other than maybe Ellen, and, well, she only wanted a sequel because she was jealous that they'd made 2 Toy Story sequels, a Monsters, Inc. follow-up, and another sequel from one of their originals from the 2000s that I can't remember for some reason. Ratatouille 2? Wait, no, Sirius Black says rats don't live very long, so that can't be right. But to be fair, not being necessary is only a minor factor. If Finding Dory was actually a better film than Incredibles 2, it wouldn't matter which one was more necessary. And I think this might be an unpopular opinion, but I don't think a sequel has to be better than the original to be worth releasing. There are plenty of sequels out there that I wouldn't consider better than the original, but still tell a good story and develop the characters further. You know, like Shrek 2 or Avengers Age of Ultron, or even Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, for all those wrong people out there who think Philosopher's Stone is better. For the most part, my stance is, if there's a good argument in favor and a large portion of people do prefer it to the original, it's a pretty good sequel, even if, in my opinion, it isn't as good. And I know for a fact, there are definitely people who prefer The Incredibles 2 to the original. Like, look how many likes that comment got. Meanwhile, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say Finding Dory is better than Finding Nemo. Like, I don't think anyone has that opinion. Honestly, if that is your opinion, make sure to not comment it down below. I couldn't care less. Because I actually need to get to the point of this video and analyze what makes Incredibles 2 better than Finding Dory. And wow, what a great transition that was. And to do so, I'm gonna split it into 3 categories: how well it follows on, do they develop the characters well, and most importantly, is the story good? So firstly, we've got whether it continues on from the first one well. And I'm actually gonna give a big yes and say both of these films follow on from the original quite well. Finding Dory takes place a year after the original, and they've just got on with their normal lives, and it actually transitions quite well into the events of the film. Incredibles 2 also obviously follows on well. It's literally the same scene that the original ended with. However, I do believe Incredibles 2 follows on better because it doesn't pan out the way you might have thought it would after watching the first film, and I like that. That was bold. And I'm splitting hairs. They both follow on well, and I'll get into that in more detail when I talk about the storylines. First though, let's talk about character development, because it is essential for any sequel to develop the original characters in an interesting and accurate way in accordance with the original. Otherwise, what's the point? And in Finding Dory, Dory is developed a lot. It reveals everything you never knew about her family and how she got to where she was before she met Marlin. It gives the backstory to all the minor plot points from the original, like how she learned to speak whale and the Just Keep Swimming song, answering all the questions no one ever asked. It's literally just Pixar's equivalent of Solo, except it did really well at the box office, so I guess it's nothing like Solo. And yeah, Dory got developed really well, but that was compensated by the fact Marlin and Nemo weren't developed at all, really. I guess Nemo had that moment of wisdom where he was like, what would Dory do? But Marlin literally didn't learn anything from the first film, and, well, my point is The Incredibles 2 develops the characters in a much better way. Sorry, I didn't mean to completely over-dramatize that. It isn't actually that exciting. Mr. Incredible is exactly how you'd think it'd be when thrown into the situation he is, where he isn't seen as the best super for the job, and actually proves himself to be quite the parent. Sometimes. Elastigirl is shown to have significantly grown as a character, and well, she even points out how she's changed since the events of the first film.
After we went underground, my husband used to listen to a police scanner, waiting for something to happen, and I got mad at him for it.
Violet continues her journey out of her shell as she goes from this shy girl to this less shy girl to this confident enough to full-on approach the boy who stood her up. girl. That might have taken it a bit far, if you ask me, but it's still character development. And Dash isn't really developed. He's just the same as he was in the first film. I don't think they knew what to do with him in this film, but that's a different problem for a different day. But in spite of this, in terms of new characters, I actually think Finding Dory did better. Hank, in particular, is the best character in the Finding universe. Don't at me. He's so well written, constantly making you wonder if you can trust him or not. Is he gonna be good? Is he gonna be the villain? Turns out no, he was just driven by his own personal interests and only his own personal interests. Does that make him a sociopath? I'm a month late on this. I don't even know why I'm making this joke. And most interestingly of all about Hank, he actually changes his outlook on life by the end of the film. He is better than any addition to The Incredibles 2, and that's high praise because I really like the Devers and the whole storytelling technique of two characters having the complete opposite interpretation from the same story. And talking about the story, let's talk about which film actually has a better story. It's The Incredibles 2. My main problem with Finding Dory's story is it just relies on plot convenience too much, which is something that's gonna happen when the main character has short-term memory loss. I do think it's dealt with as well as it could have been for the plot to go forward, so props to Pixar for making the most out of a bad situation, but you know, you didn't have to get stuck in that situation. Just because a character's popular doesn't mean you should make them the main character of the sequel. It's not a proven method that works. Some characters are better as the side character. A few examples of this plot convenience that I can think of at the top of my head are like right at the start when they need to get to Morro Bay, California, and well, Marlin just happens to know a guy. Because I'm sure him and Crush have been keeping in contact a lot since the first film, emailing back and forth and whatnot. I know it's good fan service to include the turtles, but that pestered me. Another example would be like when Marlin and Nemo find Dory completely off screen and then explain how they found her, but they shouldn't have just worked their way through the entire aquarium off camera. Honestly, Marlin and Nemo could just not be in the film, and I really don't think it would change that much. Dory spends the entire film away from them, and they only really serve a purpose, so Dory has to go back and save them from the truck at the end, and oh yeah, she somehow convinces an entire group of otters. What's a group of otters called? A romp, I think? Sorry, where was I? Oh yeah, she convinces a romp of otters to get up on the road and risk their lives. You know, so the final scene in the truck can happen, which is also so filled with plot convenience. Don't even get me started on that scene. Let's just move on. Let's talk about some positives, because I do like the whole idea of Dory seeking out her family and in turn finding herself. It works well enough as a sequel concept, and there are a few things I really like and have a really good Pixar feel to it. Like the way all the fish in the kids zone try and hide as a way of dealing with the kids poking at them. And as normal, there are some very tragically emotional scenes. My favorite being the scene where they try and play off that Dory's parents are dead. While I was never believing into the fact her parents were dead because I knew they'd get reunited, I just love the way they animate this scene all from Dory's perspective as she can't believe what she's just heard and makes her escape back to the ocean. And yeah, what a scene. I love that. Unfortunately, the rest of the film just doesn't live up to that. The thing that made Finding Nemo great was that it was a story of a fish achieving the impossible and traveling the length of the ocean to find his son. And there's nothing in the entire film that Marlin and Dory do that make me think, that was a bit over the top. Meanwhile, I said those words about 4 times during Finding Dory. Like, I can live with them sneaking around in a pushchair, you know, getting some confused looks here and there. That was funny. Nemo and Marlin jumping from fountain to fountain was a little bit ridiculous. But the pinnacle was when they managed to overthrow and drive a truck into the ocean despite the pursuit of the police. That was just too much for me. Incredibles 2, on the other hand, required a lot less plot convenience to tell what I consider a more fitting story. It starts in basically the perfect way, showing the fight scene we've been waiting 14 years for and revealing that things weren't actually happily ever after the Omnidroid fight. And the whole motivation of the film revolves around the initial premise of the series. Because come on, superheroes are made illegal and they don't do anything about it. Have you not seen Captain America Civil War? It has a significantly better protagonist who's more relatable, unless you actually have short-term memory loss, and wasn't just made the protagonist because she was popular. Because if that was the case, they'd have probably made Edna the main character, and I'm gonna be honest, some people would probably want to see that, so I won't even... And one thing this film really provides is so many good action sequences. And I do have some minor problems, like the fact the pacing is kind of off. They don't really make it clear how much time passes from Elastigirl getting the job and supers being re-legalized. Like, it could have been 3 days or it could have been a month. If you're counting time from Bob and the kids' perspective, it doesn't feel that long, but it has to have been for Elastigirl to achieve all she's achieved. It's such a minor thing and it doesn't take away from the story, and there are also a lot of minor things working for it. Like the whole story behind the Incredible and what happened to it, because I never even stopped to think what happened to the Incredible, but it was actually quite important to this film, and it will sell lots of toys. I loved every Jack scene with the family learning to deal with him getting his powers, and Edna. Please tell me where I can get this nostalgic but also good follow-up storytelling in Finding Dory. And I actually think there's only one major thing making it worse than the original, and that's the fact the Screenslaver is a worse villain than Syndrome. She didn't have as good an origin story, and her plan just fell apart way too quickly for my liking. Like, there are literally less than 2 minutes between the first and the 8th of the 9 Screenslaver masks being broken off, and therefore the whole ending just felt a little anticlimactic, to be honest. But Evelyn was still pretty good. I mean, as I said earlier, I liked her a lot as a character, and she would have got away at the end if it wasn't for plot convenience giving Elastigirl a sudden burst of oxygen to get back up and attack her. I'm just saying. I know I've said multiple times this video that it isn't as good as the original, but it actually gets pretty close and is so clearly better than Finding Dory and Cars 3. Which is why I say it gets its own new category. They're nearly as good as the original. I mean, we now have 4 categories, and I know technically Monsters University isn't a sequel, but I think it can join Incredibles 2 in that category, right? Well, I'm gonna get roasted in the comments for that opinion, so I'm gonna go before the outrage ensues. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. You can subscribe to my channel clicking somewhere over there. You can watch another video clicking somewhere over there. There'll be merch over there. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm nearly at 30,000 followers on Instagram, so I'm worth a follow. Yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.